And welcome to the ISP A to Z Future Speaker Series, where we connect our parents and carers with leading experts to explore future careers and equip you with the tools to have meaningful conversations with your children about their future careers. Today, we delve into the significant topic of sustainability and how it's shaping the future of the workforce and also shaping the essential skills your children will need to thrive. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Robbie and Daianna from Today Do This. Today Do This helps companies achieve ambitious impact commitments by enabling employees to take action using the skills they bring to work every day. They make it everybody's business to change the world for the better. Want to improve your company's impact on people and planet? Join the businesses working with Today Do This to empower employees to take action on issues they care about. And clients include Pfizer, Expedia Group, Chivas Brothers, Navico, Accenture, The Washington Post, Forbes, Speedos, University of Oxford Saïd Business School. So lots of amazing names there as well. So thank you so much, Robbie and Daianna, for joining us today. So first of all, I'm going to jump into the first question, which is what inspired you to start a sustainably focused company?
Thank you, Joe. I'm happy to kick off with that. So for me, the inspiration probably dates back to when I was 10 years old, a very long time ago. A little story. So on the 20th anniversary of Earth Day, which people can look up to see how old I am, my teacher at school gave me a baby tree, and I took it home and I planted it in the back garden. And I remember feeling in that moment this like sudden interest in the planet and in the environment. That prompted me to start an environmental club at school, which led to studying environmental studies as part of university, which then resulted in me pursuing a career in sustainability, which I'm sure we'll talk about some more. But that career started kind of back in the late 90s, early 2000s, before sustainability was as kind of de rigueur as it is now. So yeah, I can talk a little bit more about kind of how my career journey led to that path. Now or later, depending on how you want to do that.
Let's dig into that as we go through. Robbie, how about you?
So, as Diana's kind of touched on, she's been in this, I guess, mode of thinking and world really her whole time. But for me, it's been a much newer thing. So, one of the interesting things that might sort of come through today's conversation is the different pathways and the different routes to this. But I was I started my life in the creative industries as a designer, then a writer, and into marketing and working in creative agencies. So when Dan and I met, which was now 12 years ago, I think, we were both working in marketing in different kinds of roles. And for me, I slowly was coming, I guess, to a sort of a realization or thinking about the fact of what kind of impact am I making with my career? What am I doing? I was working for big global companies, going to Hollywood premieres, worked on every continent in different ways, worked in, Houses of Parliament, did all sorts of different things. Dead exciting, really great stuff, brilliant opportunities. But of course, at some point you sort of think, is there something, I thought, is there something more you can do with these skills that you're building than change people's opinion on what washing powder they might want to buy. And that's really when Dan and I sort of joined forces, I suppose, first as friends, just as people who were interested in doing something about the world. I guess the sort of inspiration to do something more formal came about from talking about how do you really get people to make different choices, get people to act on the things they say they want to do but don't necessarily take on. And we can say a bit more about this as we go through, but as you kind of touched on in the opening, we work with businesses to make every job a sustainability job, really, and get people thinking, whatever they're in, what can they do? So the inspiration was really to use the skills that I'd built in a sort of 20-year career to try and make a bigger positive impact in the world.
Amazing. Great. And I mean, we've touched a little bit on our second question here, but how did your career journey lead you to this path? I guess, Daianna, do you want to go first? You were kind of itching to tell us a bit more about how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, so I had worked in sustainability for nearly 20 years when we started Today Do This. First in the public sector at the US Environmental Protection Agency straight out of university. Then I was with a while for an energy foundation in the early days of that. And then when I moved to the UK, worked for a while with one of the Prince of Wales's, Prince Charles's charities called Business in the Community. Then went on to work for kind of big and small companies. So I'd sort of seen sustainability from lots of different angles, but always with a view to improving the impact of business on people and planet. And after hearing companies sort of talk about sustainability for years without seemingly taking too much action, I decided that it was time to kind of take bolder action myself to help kind of move things along. And that was sort of the spark that led me to strike out on my own and ultimately start Today Do This, which maybe Robbie can tell you a little bit more about as well.
Yeah, I mean, it may be useful. I know it's sort of one of the other questions, but then I'll say a little bit more about why, maybe a more sort of all-encompassing version of why my career led me to here, but equally what we do as a business, because it's probably useful to get an understanding as we talk about some more stuff as we go through. I mean, as I said, I was a designer, I was a writer, I was, basically earned my living coming up with ideas and solving problems for people. And, doing that time over time, you sort of build various skills in things like behavioral science, psychology, in this sort of nudging people from one thing to another, but just understanding that people don't often do what they say they're going to do, and that they act in irrational ways, which we all do, of course, very normal human being thing to do. And when I think we have come through periods such as, again, Daianna mentioned it already, because it was tell one's age, but through 2008 and the financial crisis of that year, through 2016 and the political upheaval of those years, you sort of look at the world and think, the people that have power, the people that are controlling things, the systems that we all live in, we can let those things continue, or we can decide to make a change and take them on. And for me, I had a very privileged upbringing and a very sort of relatively easy path through life. I own all the privileges. It's very straightforward for me. But actually, what can one do at certain junctures in their career to say, I want to make a change? And I'd kind of come to the end of the road, I think, in what I felt I could get from my previous career. And it was an opportunity to change. I didn't think I'd necessarily end up where we have ended up today. But I think, and I'll talk about this maybe in some of the answers to questions later on, I think that's such a hugely important thing for anyone, for young people that are trying to work out their way in the world, is to get a sense that, you've got to have the opportunities to try different things. You've got to have the opportunities to also recognize what you are good at and where that might be applicable. That's not just the obvious ways. There are certain jobs where being creative is like, sure, a designer, what are you going to do? Design newspapers, design magazines, design books, or design posters. It's like, no, there's way more than you can do with those kind of skills. But to get on to kind of what we do and how that's come to life, I mean, Dan and I put our heads together and we sort of asked the question, where can we make an impact with those skills that we've developed through decades of kind of experience with businesses? And we recognize that actually the levers that one has to pull as an individual to make an environmental impact or to make a social impact on the world are there. And we can do stuff as individuals, from recycling and not flying so much, or being more open-minded about people's choices in their own lives and so on. But actually the role that we have in the businesses that we're part of is much, much bigger. So if you're in finance in a global corporation, or if you're in marketing in a big national business or organization, or operations facilities, whatever it might be, any role at any level in any business, you have a role to play in sustainability. And so we work to make sustainability part of everyone's job. And we work with clients like Pfizer and Expedia Group and Danone and Speedo, generally big international firms on a global basis, and specifically with their chief sustainability officers or their heads of ESG and environment and social and governance, or heads of purpose, that kind of thing, to get them to essentially be able to achieve their targets, which is going to be sustainability targets like net zero, reducing emissions, reducing waste, maybe diversity and inclusion goals, those kind of things, and get them to be able to leverage the more breadth of the human resources available in the company, everyone else making it part of their job, in order to do that. And that's something businesses are having to increasingly do. I think we'll probably touch on this through other answers, increasingly through legislation, through literally legal requirements, through pressure from investment, through pressure from customers, through pressure from employees. Businesses, if they want to survive, let alone if they want to thrive, are having to think about these sustainability issues all the time. And so that's the stuff we help them to do in a way that is aligned to their business objectives overall.
Amazing. Yeah.
Did that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you mentioned there about, the journey. And I think that's something that we look quite a lot at ISP, around the journey that our students take. There's no longer one single career. Our students will have multiple careers, opportunities, downtime where they kind of create their own opportunities for entrepreneurship. So, we fully support the journey and the idea that the transferable skills you develop from one career to the next are so important and so relevant to the future as well. So I guess moving on, what are some of the emerging trends in the sustainability field that students today should be paying attention to? What's kind of up and coming in the next few years that our students should be watching out for?
I would say that probably the biggest one is climate. So the focus on climate, though still not enough, is greater than ever, and I think that's going to grow. So from all the conversations that I've been having, that's that's certainly not going anywhere from a science perspective. But also the professional opportunities in there are growing. So in so many cases, for example, clean energy is becoming cheaper than fossil fuels. Electric vehicles are, they're not going to go anywhere. China is going really big on them. Insurance companies are increasingly focused on climate risk. The finance sector has made some really big commitments, and they will no doubt be held to account on those. The same for companies who are facing increasing regulation and reporting requirements, as we were just saying. And if they don't deliver, lawsuits are already being brought against them. And more governments in the world are taking climate more seriously as they see the effects on their own countries and their own people. So that's all great stuff. Meanwhile, the climate continues to warm because we're not moving fast enough. But like I said, we can't sort of fight the laws of physics. So if human beings are serious about our future, then I think any career related to climate is bound to be a good bet, both for today's students and for the rest of us too.
And I think I'm getting a sense of your answer to this question, but how do you see the demand for sustainability professionals changing in the coming years?
I think despite a lot of the kind of noise right now, sustainability and sustainability professionals are here to stay. But there's a crucial change that I'm finally starting to see, which I feel like I've been banging on about for my entire career. And that is the shift from this stuff is the right thing to do, which it is, but sadly isn't enough in our world. A shift from that to it's good business. It's good for business. It's good for national economies, and it's good for all of us. So, for example, for business, it's a source of innovation as kind of consumer demand and technology evolves. For economies, it's a source of new jobs as our infrastructure kind of has to keep up. And for all of us, at the most basic, a lot of this stuff is it's a way of saving money and cutting costs as a result of just being less wasteful.
The more of a shift towards we're all in this together. It's a benefit for all of us, as opposed to the moralization that was perhaps there in the early days.
Yeah, less of the kind of doom and gloom and we must do this because we'll feel bad about it otherwise, and more this is where the future is headed. Yeah.
Amazing. So I guess our next question, which we've had, was around, what sort of high school subjects or extracurricular activities best prepare students for studying a career in sustainability, or obviously entrepreneurship, you're entrepreneurs as well as in your sustainable business, and which ones did you take, or what would you recommend for our high school students?
I think it's, I mean, entrepreneurship in particular, I don't think there's any path to that other than, you sort of, it's the sort of thing you try and you either like it or you don't like it, and you kind of go on. It's a way of life. I think in general, though, across that and sustainability, actually in general, I think anything that develops critical thinking skills is really, really useful in sustainability. And of course, that's relevant in several subjects. I don't know if it's taught particularly in a lot of schools, but I ended up studying philosophy at university. It's not something I had the chance to do at school, though I think my sister was able to study to school, which is quite cool. But obviously, whether it's looking at history from trying to compare, different narratives of history and what's truth, what does truth mean, and what are people trying to say that's propaganda or not propaganda, or being able to sort of critically assess sources in different ways for different kinds of subjects is super useful, because a huge kind of aspect, I guess, around sustainability especially, and building on some of the stuff Diana's just said, is getting a handle on what actually is the real stuff that really matters in the world, that is actually going to change things, and what we might call greenwashing at its most simplistic, which is, people just saying stuff that sounds kind of fluffy and nice because it makes them feel good, but actually they're either doing nothing about it or in fact doing completely the opposite. And being professional in this kind of world, a lot of the conversations that take place, as happens all the time in situations, right, are between people being like, yes, this is really the right way to do things, and no, this is the way we're going to do things. And the reality is, if you actually want your business to succeed, if you want your career to succeed, if you want the industry that you're part of to be moving in the right direction, it's going to take people, being able to sort of have those difficult conversations and be able to articulate arguments in the right way. And again, sort of those kind of skills coming through. So I mean, extracurricular you touch on as well, whether that's debating stuff or even sort of confidence that comes from being the performing arts, or things will make sense there. The other thing that I'd touch on is teamwork, and being able to communicate with other people and bring people with you and get people on side to what you're doing. A lot of the work that we do with clients is sort of built on the basis that what they need to do is go out into the rest of their organization. And this will also be true if you're working in a sort of sustainability based organization working with third parties, whether that's governments or other businesses or whatever it might be, and have to make the case for why this stuff is important, it will happen, but do so in a positive way, do so in a way that will bring people with you and get them excited. So I think, for young people, and I have two very young people in my life, a 4 and 6 year old, so they're quite far off any of this in some ways. But I think the longer that we can develop those skills and really embed them into who we are and how we operate as people, whatever the sort of technical skills that we bring to the table are absolutely critical. And maybe we'll say a bit more as we go on about the fact that, there are technical things that people can do, but also, as we've already said several times, everybody needs to be thinking about this in whatever role they have. So actually that kind of, as I say, optimism with realism baked in is so critical to moving stuff forward.
And I know we've talked about the sort of skills that we think are relevant. I know a lot of people will ask, do you need to be a scientist to be a sustainability expert? What's kind of the relationship between science and sustainability versus, being able to the translation of that research into, real world situations?
I think that's exactly it, as you put it. I mean, absolutely. Look, there are material scientists, for example, that are out there trying to find lower carbon versions of the things we use every day, or things that are lighter so they don't take as many emissions to ship or store, that kind of stuff. And there's people working on innovations like carbon capture, bringing CO2 out of the atmosphere into a big Hoover, for a better way of discussing it, and storing it somewhere, as well as interesting stuff you can do with sort of bio materials, seaweed and potato peelings and whatever. So that's all very science, chemistry, biology, physics, using those skills way beyond my capabilities, right? Don't have a clue, but really important stuff. And absolutely there are roles there. But exactly what you say, if that stuff cannot be translated into business models that are actually going to be sustainable in the other sense of the word, as in profitable and be able to be existing in other times, if it's not things that are going to be picked up by the public, if people just don't want to do things, and Tesla, I'll touch on the guy behind the business, but as a business, they've made electric cars sexy, and that has been a huge part of that revolution in that space. It's much more complex than that in terms of it's not as simple as electric cars good and other cars bad, but actually any of these things that are opening those conversations and moving forward, it takes all of those kind of different skills of marketing, of operations, of facilities to bring that in.
Absolutely. Yeah. As you said, it's everyone's responsibility, no matter what job you have in your company or, in your business, that, we all play a part in making sure that messaging is there and consistent as well. We touched a little bit there on kind of technology and innovation, but how will this play a big role in shaping the future of career sustainability? Because obviously technology is coming, it's, there in present in all of our lives. And how is this kind of changing the field of sustainability as we know it?
I think with technology, I've touched on a lot of this stuff there, and I think that the simple thing I'd say is that technology is not going to be the only thing that helps us to solve the big sustainability crises we have. As I've already said, there are lots of things that people are doing, and if young people want to get into those worlds and pursue a scientific career in its most simple sense, fantastic, and that's going to be needed, and it's going to be critical that we stop extracting value out of the Earth's natural resources and find different ways to do things. It's critical that we let nature return to what it is. All of these things will have to happen, but there are seriously big, when we talk about innovation, there are some huge questions that we have about the capitalist system that we live under, the patriarchy that we live under, these big, difficult philosophical questions that people in policy-making roles, that people in government, that people in business, all kinds of different businesses too, the media, academia, journalism, all of these different roles are going to have to play. And so I think anyone, and again, it sounds very repetitive, but it's because it's so important, right? Any role that anybody is going to play and going into a career, the only way that we're going to address some of these, Maggie's having an exciting time. You get to bring a dog to work as well if you work in sustainability. It's very good. Anyone that is going to have any opportunity to do any of these things in the future and sort of see the role that they have to play in progress and making the world a better place, to be a bit sort of facile about it, is going to have to innovate and be part of changing these systems for the better. And so I think, hopefully we've been covering, and some of the answers to these, just the sheer breadth of different kinds of roles and opportunities that people have to play into this. And I think innovation for me is, yes, of course, it's about the very technical stuff, but actually the really seriously difficult questions that society will face will come from some of those roles. As I say, things like policy and legislation, legal will be a big part of that too.
So looking at a huge systemic shift rather than just tweaking around the edges, basically, like the time for that has passed. Now it's time for fundamental change to move us on in this kind of future pathway that we're looking at.
Yeah,
definitely.
100%. Yeah, I mean, just to add to that a little bit as well, around kind of skills, and whether they're technical skills or soft skills that people need if they pursue careers in sustainability. I think one of the big ones, and sorry, you might have mentioned this, Robbie, while Maggie was working. I think a big one is economics, because I think that kind of sits in the middle of business and policy making and social science, and is such a big part of kind of figuring out how to balance the kind of cost benefit around some of the investments that need to be made on sustainability. So I think that's another I think that's another sort of technical one. And in terms of some softer skills, I think Robbie mentioned some of them there, but like sales skills, I think, are really important. Just being anything that has to do with kind of influencing other people. So whether that's being able to sell people an idea or a better product, political skills and influencing people that way, diplomacy skills, like a lot of that I think is needed as well. I think Robbie mentioned kind of debate skills as well. And really at the end of the day, I think a lot of it is just like an interest and a love and a passion for this stuff, which I think all of us who work in sustainability really share. Kind of everybody who I know who works in this space loves their job. We were having a conversation with somebody yesterday who I know from business school. And he's worked for some really big global organizations in operations roles, but was always kind of interested in sustainability and was finally able to get into a kind of senior sustainability role. And you know, we had a conversation about, well, things are looking like they might get a little bit tough, you know, over the next kind of few months or years. Are you, you know, thinking about going back to something else? And he was really adamant to stay working in the sustainability space. So it is something that I think a lot of people have a lot of interest in and passion towards.
So, and how do you think students can start to develop these skills as they're kind of going through their high school careers? What can they be doing kind of inside and outside the classroom to really develop these kind of soft and technical skills they need to succeed in the field?
Yeah, I mean, so I think Robbie covered like a lot of the sort of school subjects and things that people can be looking at, which is, you know, covers a broad range of things. But I think in addition to sort of school subjects and projects, I mean, I'd encourage people to just go and like pick something up at the library, right? As a family. There are, you know, for all ages. I know that there's like everything from picture books to nonfiction books to fiction for older kids, magazines, all kind of around the topic of sustainability and more sustainable living and kind of, you know, greener futures. And so there's lots of stuff that people can find outside of school online. There's a growing number of like climate literacy programs. There's one in particular. Their website is theweek.000. And it's a really lovely program where you can do it. It's meant to be done in groups, whether that's kind of with family or neighbors or coworkers, where you sort of spend a week watching a few kind of films and having some conversations around climate and sustainability. It's a really lovely program. So I'd encourage people to have a look at that as a family. And yeah, I mean, things like, you know, getting involved in debate clubs or Model UN or those kinds of activities that are sort of extracurricular as well, that give people those kind of influencing and debate and critical thinking skills. Because it is, yeah, some of this stuff is technical, but a lot of it really isn't. It's about kind of behavior change and influencing people and, you know, negotiating and yeah, a lot of those skills can be brought to the table, and you know, there'll be a lot of ways outside of school, whether it's extracurriculars or things that people can find in their libraries or online or in lots of other places that can help build those skills as well.
Definitely. I think we mentioned like psychology, didn't we, as well, like getting people to change those habits and, you know, nudging people into, you know, the change in and the economic, you know, persuading people that from a financial position is actually good for you, as well as from an environmental and, you know, human race point of view as well. So there's lots of, you know, aspects to bring into all of that kind of, you know, persuading people to change, not only just individuals but governments and the global community as well. So kind of moving on to towards the end of our questions, thinking back to our audience, our parents today, what kind of advice would you give to a parent to support their child who might be thinking about a sustainability related career and or becoming an entrepreneur as well? Because obviously these are two careers that fit together, but also two careers that might be separate as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I touched on this earlier. I think, you know, in terms of sort of being an entrepreneur, I think I was brought up in a household with quite an entrepreneurial father, and I think it's something you kind of find yourself in. I think if you, the way I've written it down in my sort of notes beforehand was, if you opt into it intellectually, I don't think that's going to be a great way of taking on, like, you choosing I'm going to be an entrepreneur. It's not a job you apply for, it's something that you do and live. But that's not remotely to cast any sense of positivity or negativity about that as a choice or anything else as a choice. And to relate to the wider points on, you know, what can parents do to support their children going into that path of life or going into sustainability, or to be honest, I think going into anything else. But particularly, my passion would be for people who we are going to see coming through the workforce in the next 5, 10, 15 years. What you want is people that are passionate about what they're doing and that are in the right place to use the skills that they have. And I think that my experience, and this is not to put blame on my school or my parents or anyone else, even myself, is that in 20, 25 years ago, you know, there was seen to be a very specific pathway from education. I had a good, expensive education through to university and a white collar type office-based job, and that is what you were going to do, and that's the way it's going to be. And even coming from quite a liberal family and having quite wild ideas myself, it felt like there was still a relatively short path. But as we've kind of discussed in all of these ways, we are going to need people in every single area of society to be thinking in this way. And I would encourage people to be very open-minded, I think, about what it looks like in terms of a successful career and what it looks like in terms of success for the society, the happiness of the people that we are in it, and all of these things. And that can sound, you know, Daianna will tell you. She doesn't need to tell you. I'm going to tell you. I'm quite a cynical person. We work in the business world because we understand the hard-nosed business side of the things that need to be done, and we believe we have value to add in that. So this isn't about a kind of, yeah, but we all just need to be, you know, we're all going to do what we want to do and be happy and be sort of like this that's not that. That's just saying that you are going to do a better job, you're going to be more effective, you're going to be more functional, and you are going to be able to deliver the things that need to be delivered if you are doing a thing that suits you, that you are happy in doing. And finding, I think, the support to kind of try those things, whether that's material support, obviously, in being able to do internships or be able to do, you know, the stuff that needs to be done, or actually more importantly, I think, is building the resilience in our young people, building the kind of acceptance that there are no absolutes in this world, and that you need to be able to try different things and find out your paths into it. That's the kind of support that I think is hugely valuable, and then pays huge dividends, possibly literally if you become a successful entrepreneur, but pays huge dividends as you go down the road to actually being able to implement this stuff as you go forward.
Amazing. And then I'm going to move on to our final question as we begin to run out of time. Is maybe this one to both of you. If you could give one piece of advice to parents on how to have a meaningful conversation with their child about sustainability and future careers, what would it be?
So I'll start. I don't know if you have anything more, Robbie, to add from what you just said, but I would say just be open-minded to their questions and their concerns and their ideas. This might not have been a typical career when, like, today's parents and carers were growing up. It certainly wasn't when I started, and for a good while after. When I told people that I was, you know, interested in or working in this space for a very long time, I got a lot of blank stares. But you know, the world has moved on. Today it is a topic and a profession that people understand and that is growing, and that will continue to grow. So I would say listen to the kids, encourage them, let them explore, support their interest. Yeah, it can literally make a world of difference.
Amazing. Any final comments, Robbie? Are you happy that Daianna's given the best advice ever?
I'm very happy for her to have the final word.
Well, all that leaves me to do then is say thank you so much for your time, your efforts, and supporting our parents and young people as they go forward and hopefully pursue some careers in sustainability in the future as well. So thank you very much.